minutes.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
5-0.
Thank you, Malavika, and your team, to Kalam, to the Kolkata Literary Meet, for hosting the Kolkata launch of the book on Rituparno Ghosh. Thank you all for being here with us today. We're going to talk about Rituparno, the personality, Rituparno, the filmmaker and the writer. And it's going to be an interesting conversation because Rituparno was such a multifaceted personality. There'll be many aspects to speak about. Kaustav Bakshi is my co-editor on the book. Rohit Dasgupta, the other editor, has had to go back to London, so he's not here with us. But we've had a wonderful series of this launch tour, starting with a seminar at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, with a spectacular launch at Jaipur Lit Fest yesterday. And here we are today to speak to the people in Ritu's city, and for all of us to remember this magnificent, talented personality with whom we did interact and work and have lots to share with you about. I think it would be quite appropriate to tell you all a little bit about the book. The book will be launched at the end of the session. We decided to put writings on Rituparno, which during his lifetime have remained rather scattered. It's quite surprising in a way that for a man who made 20 feature films in 20 years, it's spectacularly prolific. For somebody of that nature of work, he didn't have any serious academic writing on him. And the audience that he had, which started with his Bengali-speaking audience, grew to be a sort of more pan-Indian, certainly a more North Indian audience. And in an equal manner, his fame and his interest in his work spread in the world outside. So he had a very, very strong interest in his works from an international audience, from international academics and scholarship. So it was time to put together some academic work on him, and we were talking about this with Ritu while he was still with us. Sadly, we started work on the book after he left. And in a way, it was good because we could focus and channelize our feelings of loss and put it in a more constructive manner into the book. So the book is divided into two parts. We have the first part, which has a whole series of very, very well-known academics and scholars who've written on Ritu's books, on his films, and some of them are on individual films, some are more generalized. In the second half, which makes it even more interesting, we have 2 long interviews with Rituparno himself, so Rituparno's voice comes through. And then we have some of his, really his favorite cast members who have given us time to talk about their work, and that includes Sharmila Di, who's here with us today to launch the book, who's kindly stayed on in the sun for another session. Also Aparna Sen and Jaya Bachchan, all of whom he called Didi, and Sharmila Di will tell you all about this, the manner in which he would create these familial ties with all of you. It was not ever really just a professional relationship where an actor came and played a part and went away. Ritu had that fascinating capacity to make someone feel she was part of a family. All of us who've worked with him created that family, a sort of surrogate family of the cast and crew who worked together over and over again. So he had this repertoire. He had favorite people with whom he worked. And there was a bunch of talent, really seriously talented people who came together to work with Ritu on his films. So the second half has cast and crew speak, and I hope all of you out there will get hold of the copy of the book and read it and tell us more about it. I think I'd like to start with asking Sharmila Di about her work with Ritu, but also even before Shubha Muhurat, you've known Ritu for a very long time.
when he was doing 19 April, he came to me. I think Reena sent him to me, and he came to me to meet me in Delhi. And he was very young then, and he was so full of ideas, and we had such an interesting conversation. Within a span of couple of hours, he told me so many interesting ideas. I mean, it was absolutely, I was riveted. And of course, he narrated the script of 19 April. He was trying to find money. Finally, he made it. And immediately, he was taken very seriously and made a space for himself. And he continued to grow. So I've known him not just working with him in Shubha Maharot, but as a friend over the years. And in fact, at one stage, I was toying with the idea of doing something for the television, and I wanted to make 13 short stories, independent stories, and I thought that would be a good idea, from this Katha publication. And so Ritu happened to be there, and in one day he wrote 4 screenplays, and hate lekhe, hate lekha, and I've still got it with me, which is my valued possession. Like, he was so quick. And at one point he used to say that I'm becoming lazy because I'm relying because I write well, and I'm relying on the. So then towards the end, he was experimenting. I think about Antarmohal time, he started trying to make films that would not, like, you couldn't tell a story of. It had to be a cinematic experience. So he was changing, and I think he went so early. I mean, he was in the process of evolving further. And I think we lost a great talent, Sangeeta, and I really want to congratulate you for coming. This is the first book. Second, is it?
Anthology.
First anthology, and I think it's very needed, because a lot of people say, we are still mourning him and we haven't got used to his absence, and we can't sort of reconcile ourselves to, a lot of people who've known Ritu intimately and understood his craft much better than us perhaps, and they are silent because they're still mourning him. But I think we can expect more literature and more discussions about his life. But meanwhile, at least we have these. We have to have, because how do you, we are impatient. We want to keep his memory alive, not that he's gone anywhere. And this is going to help the diaspora also, because it's in English and it's going to go everywhere. So I think this is really wonderful. But there's so much to say. And then maybe I'll just wait for the mic. When you give me the mic again, I'll speak a bit more about him.
Yeah. Writing about Rituparno was not just an academic venture for us. It was a project which came out of love, deep emotions. And we have been talking for a very long time with Rituda about a book on him, and he was terribly excited because he was basically a very academic person. And he had that very naive and childish way of asking, "Amake niye keu boi likhbe? Toro mone korish keu boi likhbe?" So he had that very juvenile way of asking. So, today what we feel that, his absence is so overwhelming for us. And what is also important, that as Sharmila Di just pointed out about the mourning. In fact, it is very rare that when a filmmaker passes away, the kind of mourning the entire city had immersed itself, that was, unprecedented. In fact, the mourning which was a performance on the part of the huge LGBT community in Kolkata, who had lost an icon. And losing an icon was also a kind of a symbolic death for a movement, for a moment. Although Rituparno Ghosh never, quote-unquote, politically participated in the Pride Walk or in the so-called LGBT political platforms, but the cultural texts which Rituda produced had a huge impact to propel the movement forward. So his death, the way it was mourned with candle lights at Nandon and the kind of, and I would like to share an incident with you, and that shows his status. While we were doing ethnography for the book, we were really struck by an incident. Somebody told me that after he passed away, the day he passed away, his house was so crowded, there were ministerial barriers and all that, so people couldn't get in. So after he passed away, people used to visit his house like a shrine. It became a pilgrimage for them, where they used to put garlands on the gate. They used to call Bishu, Rituda's assistant, all that, and Bishu used to come out and they used to give him garlands. And if Bishu was not available, they used to put the garlands on the gate. So his house almost became a shrine. And all of that, you know, was so terribly impactful for us to realize the kind of stardom Rituda commanded rather. I mean, it is unprecedented. So, you know, this book also deals with that, the tremendous stardom this person commanded. I would like to ask Darshan Di, who had been a very close associate of Rituda for a very, very long time. And she has very interesting anecdotes to share, anecdotes which definitely have very deep political meanings as well. So Darshan Di, would you?
Yes, thank you. That the mourning period got over, I feel this book will be a celebration of all that Ritu did. And thank you so much for writing it. Namaskar and good morning to all, good afternoon to all of you. Rituda was a very, very dear friend and my morning friend. At 5 o'clock in the morning, there would be a ring and it would be him. And he would want to talk about anything and everything that was going on in his mind. He was always very early to rise. He did all his writings in the morning. He made phone calls to all of us in the morning, and he was so childish. He was so excited about whether my tailor would have his outfit ready. And would I be able to deliver to his house at 9 o'clock, because he wanted to wear it at 10 o'clock for the interview. And that, what do you think, which jewelry or which scarf or what would I accessorize it with? And I would say, but Rituda, I don't think I have this order from you. And he would say, Dana, 2 minute Dana. And he would put the phone down and he would immediately send me a message within 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, of my conversation of that outfit which I had taken an order for. And it was incredible, his memory. It was just incredible how he remembered and how he had this passion to dress up, to celebrate, to make its statement not only through his writing but through his clothing. And I really want to ask you, do you think that he was trying to make a political statement, as you mentioned that your book has covered it, that with the way he dressed? I'd like to really know a little more about whether that was the case.
As far as Darshandi's relationship with Rituda was concerned, I was very much a witness to that, and I know the kind of abdar he used to do. Yes, of course. What is interesting is that, yes, of course, he was making a very deep political statement. Because the way he cross-dressed, the way, in fact, I don't know whether I could call it cross-dressing, but it was more about accessorizing in a way which was more androgynous than like categorically masculine or categorically feminine. So that way, what Rituda was doing in his sartorial outfits, I think he was trying to make a statement as far as gender politics is concerned. He was always addressing that liminality between those constricted structures of the male and the female. So Ritu, in many of his interviews and also in this book, you will see that he has claimed himself to be an androgynous artist. Maybe he was not really associating that androgyny to do with particularly sexuality, but also androgyny in terms of being artistic and aesthetic. Because if you are not androgynous, you cannot be a good artist. So Ritu was kind of, literalizing the metaphor of the androgynous artist in the sartorial clothes he wore, because that made a huge political statement. Yeah,
I think it really was extremely courageous of him to do that. But coming back to the kind of films he made, because ultimately it's we are here to talk about him as the filmmaker, and also, of course, that the his volume, like first person, like we really used to look forward to his thinking. I remember going to Jaipur Film Festival, and I was asked to talk about many things, and I was slightly out of my depth, and I rang up Ritu, and as you say, the first thing in the morning, it was the brightest for him, and he proceeded to tell me, and I said, hang on, I'm writing this down. And then, the way he would talk, it would have a visual, and which has just remained in my memory forever, because it was so easy to follow. I mean, he really read so much, and he knew so much, and we really, I have personally lost somebody that I could talk to and learn from, although he was so much younger than I. And I think after he lost his mother, there was a kind of change in his filmmaking, about the time of Shop Choritro Kalpunik, when he started thinking about how cinema can project like an absence and existence in the same, like the physical world as well as the internal world, and juxtaposed in the same frame. I think that became, he was experimenting with that kind of, and less of dialogues as such. And I think that was very interesting, the way he was developing, which has been sadly cut short. But so I think he was after Manikda, and he was extremely talented, and he was also very conflicted. So what was coming out from him was so interesting and so different.
Yes. And Sharmila, if I can ask you a question.
Yeah.
In Shubha Murat, also I found that it started as a, the thing is the murder a mystery, a thriller. Yeah. And then I find that it was going into what most of his films went to, is focusing more on relationships.
Yes.
So did you see that in...
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it was much more than the murder mystery. It was a very, my role was extremely complex.
Yes.
And that character justified everything. To her, it wasn't really a murder at all. It was totally, it was not somebody, not being deprived of becoming a mother and having lost her, miscarried, etc. So yes, and also as an actress, we all loved working with him, because he really took out the best in us. And of course, he had this habit of showing us how to act, which sometimes we mocked him and got fed up with him, but at the same time he was doing it better than us, which we didn't like. But yes, we learned it. We knew that he would make us look good and bring out the best in us. And while just before he left us, he had come to collect his award from Delhi, and by that time he was quite ill. And so I was sending him food. He wanted a certain kind of food, so he came, and then he spent one evening with us, and he had about a handful of medicines which he had to take. And so I remember that evening so well. And again, he told us so many, shared his plans, his future plans with us, of all the films that he wanted to make. And I said, what's the point of telling me, because you're not going to take me in that film, and you're going to first ask me, and then I'll find out through another source you've taken somebody else. Because I remember, he asked Nandita for Chokher Bali, and then finally it was Aishwarya who did it. And Nandita did Shubha Muhurat only on the promise of being cast there. So, and then of course he never picks up the phone and clears it with you for whatever his compulsions may be. But so sometimes we used to get very fed up. So I teased him. I said, well, no, Rinkudi, you are going to be in this film. And we had such a lovely time. And I had no idea that he was that unwell and he would leave us so soon. But again, I repeat that, he was, I think for want of a better word, we could call it magic realism. The way he was going towards, that cinematic experience that he wanted to create in the audience. But we never really saw the culmination or the fulfillment of that promise.
And I agree with that. Rinkudi, I also think we are sitting here with Ritu's audience, so there's really nothing new to be said. But in perspective, I think it's we needed this time to step out of that grief area and also that area of close proximity. And when you look, it's so clear that there were these three phases in his career. And the early phase where he's certainly using a feminist voice and he's got feminist stories. And also he's working with very little money. So it was almost the lack of funds which created those tight chamber dramas where you had just two characters speaking to each other within a house. So the constructs and the spaces that he created had a lot to do with the economy of the industry. The fact that there wasn't enough money, the fact that the Bengal film industry at that time was in deep crisis. And you know about that.
In some ways, he revived the industry.
He revived it,
yes,
and single-handedly revived it. And so when we moved from that earlier stage where he'd already started winning the national awards, there comes the next stage where Chokher Bali, the oldest script that he had touted, he'd moved around for more than 10 years trying to make that film. And when he finally did make the film, the money came through because he had Aishwarya Rai playing Binodini. And that had certain good things said about it, certain bad things said about it, but it also created that bilingual tradition of making films both in Bangla and in Hindi, and the whole ability to draw in talent from Bombay. So it started with Aishwarya, but we also had Abhishek and then Ajay Devgan and most unlikely people, Jackie Shroff, coming in to do fabulous stuff, and then Mr. Bachchan coming in to do The Last Layer. So that second phase was...
Preeti Zinta also.
Preeti Zinta as well in The Last Layer. So it's that second phase where he was really moving from projects which grew bigger and bigger. And then, Sharmila, you talked about the third phase, of course, which was the more experimental phase where he was now being able to pan out and look at cinematic form rather than just look at the strength of his script writing, which was huge. It was probably his strongest strength. But in the later films, there is looking towards a more different experimental way of dealing with time. I think he was always breaking time at that point. And it's also the time when he's telling me, Bubu, our shomai beshi nei. So it's almost as if he knew that,
yes,
that he had very little time at the end, and he was talking about it. And I remember one day early in the morning, we would come in earliest onto the stage, especially if they were period films and there was a lot of set dressing to do. The amount of research, Darshan, we were talking about it, the sort of research we did, and we loved doing that research, period research for architecture, for spaces, for the interior designs, for the costumes. All that was done in a collaborative manner, and he would come at sort of 5:30 in the morning to the sets, be there earliest to see that things were laid out just the way he would like them to be. And he was sitting there on one of those old faux poster beds and saying, I'd love to go away and do a PhD in London. I'd love to go and live abroad because then I could live more freely. And he was talking about his sexual preferences at that time. And it wasn't a free world for him in Kolkata, certainly not. But he said, on the other hand, look, I make a film every year and I have 40 people depending for their income. And if I don't make a film again in the next 6 months, what will my team do? What will my crew do? And he was really expressing that sort of dichotomy and dilemma that a man who single-handedly revived the Bengal film industry would possibly feel at some point. A need to escape, but also the responsibility of staying on and holding up what he had created, the world that he had created.
I have a question for Sharmila Di. Since in this book, all of us have recognized that Ray was one of his very prominent mentors. And since you worked with both Rituda and Ray, and you had a very close association with Rituda as well, and you just talked about acting, we would be very, in fact, I used to have long conversations about acting with him, and I remember that he telling me that how easy it was to direct you because you had been kind of, tutored by someone like Ray. So could you tell me, was there a difference in methodology in which he handled his actors than the way Ray handled them?
I really... I don't like comparisons, really. Ray was Ray and Ritu was Ritu, although they both have the first initial is R. But other than that, they were very... And Ritu was very much a product of today. He understood now. And and he was seeped in then also, because he had a perfect, I mean, he was the best read person I've really, he was extremely well read. He had seen lots of old films, so he knew everything about everything. But his expression was today. And Ray was, but where both of them, I would say, are the same, was they were able to not create any artificial resistance from the actor. Both of them had the actor's complete trust. We could trust, and we knew that whatever he was saying, and we just went with that moment. And it was never more than one take or second take, or if at all. So he didn't really, he helped us continuously by giving us, why don't you just pick up that, or why don't you just give that pause there, very constructive suggestions, doable suggestions. Sometimes a director would say that, imagine the morning sunrise and you are a little bud and you're opening, and you can't really relate to that at all, and you say, so he wasn't like that. It was whatever his suggestions were, was very much doable. So I think he was a great, we all, every actress wanted to work with him, with Ritu. Yeah.
Sangeeta, I have a question for you. Because we all knew about this premonition that he had, that he was not there for long. In fact, in many of his films, we have seen there is a consistent obsession with death. And it's not just a celebration, but the loneliness, the loss, the idea of agony, anguish. So death has been a consistent theme in most of his films. So Sangeeta, if you can talk about that, because your article in this book deals with that to a certain extent, vis-a-vis Abba Homan.
Yeah, well, I think it's just very interesting when you're looking at a director with such prolific work. You're looking at 20 films, and you're also finding this very interesting evolution in his artistic development. That's what makes an auteur worth calling an auteur. And if he is an auteur, then he has these ideas and motives and symbols and images and preoccupations which carry on for the rest of his work, and they are manifested in very different ways. So we always find that certain preoccupations or certain thoughts that he had in his earlier films keep coming back, just as the way in which he deals with the motive of film within film. How many of his films really are set on film sets? They are about film crew. They are about the dilemma of the director and the actor. And he very cleverly just brings that straight away in. And he would say, the films that I haven't made, I'm going to put them in there as film within film. So when he made Bari Wali, he had a film unit making Chokir Bali because he hadn't got his money for Chokir Bali yet. When he was doing Kala, then they're filming Nalok, which was another film that he wanted to make. So there was always that, wishful or a sort of future area or an impossible area that he was trying to bring into his works. And I think this in-betweenness is something that interests me, and I've written about it, because even when we look at a film like Abu Haman, which I deal with in a very analytic fashion in my essay, I've tried to see how certain ideas, simply like the family relationships of a child and parents, keeps recurring, right from Unishe April, right till Chitrangada. It is that family dining table where characters are speaking, but they are talking about things which perhaps were not expressed before. In Chitrangada, when he is saying, shall I change, have a sex change, he's speaking to his parents, and this is not a discussion that you would have seen in literature or in film before that. Ironically, that has been made possible later on. Today, there are much younger people. Here's Kaustav talking about how much of an icon he became to people who had a different way of choosing what is important to them in life or their sexual preferences. So in that way, he was becoming an icon himself, becoming a celebrity himself because of all the fashion and the design and the sartorial statements that he was beginning to make. So there was a certain self-conscious way of constructing that for us.
And almost single-handedly, really. I don't think there was anybody else quite like him.
And it didn't happen without ridicule. It didn't happen without rebuttal. There were enough people around who would really ridicule the word Rituparno itself, and say, oh, it's Rituparno-esque. If you're becoming a Rituparno if you're slightly feminine or if you're slightly different.
Also the pun on porno.
On porno, of course, and that's manifest. But Javed Saab sitting there at the back, and he very kindly launched our book yesterday at the Jaipur Literary Festival. And he said something about Ritu being both classical and contemporary, which is exactly what you're saying, that he was writing stories of our times, but he was also evoking the classical. He was evoking things from the past which we need to remember. And I think that's a great contribution, apart from his obsession and his growing obsession with death. I think this preoccupation to go back to mythology, to go back to history, to evoke characters like Chaitanya Dev, to evoke characters like the Buddha, which brought to us this sense of androgyny, of knowledge, of wisdom, of compassion. And in a way, Ritu himself was also turning to be a character very different from his very troublesome, very bitchy, very gossipy character that he was when he was younger.
Had a lovely, I don't know what's happened to all his scripts and all his writings. I hope they're there, because he had a wonderful script on Chaitanya.
Yeah.
Was it published?
Part of it. Only part of it. And he wanted Saif at some point.
Without his muscles.
Can I ask Darshandi one question? Just since you worked with him as a costume designer, for instance, for Jeevan Sriti, which was a very important film, and the kind of period drama, the period costumes, which are expressive of his aesthetics as well. Could you share on that? Because that's very important.
Yes.
We talk about that.
He went to Oxford bookstore at 10:30 in the morning, and he bought this book, and he came straight to Weaver Studio, and he put the book down, and he said that, okay, I need 2 hours of your undivided attention. This is something that I want to start, and I need completely your full attention. And he went page by page right through the book, and in greatest of great details, from not only the look, the construction, the detailing, the fabric, and what he wanted to use in which scene where. The 2 hours became 7-8 hours, and then next morning he was back at 10 o'clock to say, okay, let's go to Jarashanko. And he took my tailor with us, and he went to show us even the great detailing of the way the buttons were in Tagore's long coats, kaftans, and the pajamas. And it was amazing, the kind of aesthetic sense, the sense of detail, the sense of research, and he'd already formed the entire visual image. And how beautifully he was able to translate that image and bring it in front of us, like it was so clear that what we had to produce. And it was very, very easy to work with him, because he was very sure of exactly what he wanted. And so it was a great learning experience working with him. And he really taught us so much to do with what goes into visualizing costumes. And thanks to him that we've been able to do a few more works with Bengali cinema, and it's really helped us where the research was concerned, including Operandi's recent film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Darshandi has been quite instrumental in reconstructing those period dramas for Rituda, and that was really interesting the way they worked in Antarmahul, Chokerbali, and later on Jeevan Smriti. So I think we should open this.
Yeah, I'd just like to end off before we open for questions by saying that, with Ritu, again, there was this fantastic fascination with celebrity culture, particularly with some Bollywood celebrities, and he always had Rekha as someone whom he worshipped and loved. And when he finally made Arikti Premir Golpo, when he acted in Just Another Love Story, his entire makeup was influenced by the public look that we have of Rekha. But on the other hand, there was the Tagorean influence. On the other hand, there was the classical influence. And there was the influence of Vaishnava culture. There was the influence of Kirtan. There was the influence of Radha Krishna, whom he evoked so many times. And today, sadly, Devajyoti Mishra couldn't be with us because his brother is ill and he's in hospital. But we were so looking forward to talking about the music and the songwriting, because that's another aspect where Ritu wrote his own songs, and they were such fabulous songs, some contemporary, some in the Kirtan style, which became part of your growing up. All the young faces here who are nodding enthusiastically, the songs which which really went viral through internet and through radio, starting from Kala, starting from the other songs. But for me, Bonomali Tumi Poro Janome Hoye Radha is what really appropriately tells us who Ritu was and who he wanted to be. Thank you again for being with us. We have time for a few questions before we launch the book.
Just the context and then the question. I was introduced to Rituparno Ghosh and his films in the almost the westernmost part of this country, in near Little Run of Kutch, by a Gujarati couple who did not speak Bengali. I, at that point in time, never watched any Bengali films, and there they were speaking like anything about Rituparno Ghosh and your film. And I was thinking, who is this guy? And that's the first time I came to know of him. After coming back to Bombay, I downloaded the film on torrent and watched it, and I was amazed. So maybe you can speak of how the people who are not from Bengal thought about him, and how did they even come to know of him? What was their context? Yeah.
Well, I think we're talking about a time when the marketing machinery was not so efficient as the way it is now in Bengal. It's still not the best, but it still is. So we had enormous content, but we didn't have distribution power, we didn't have marketing power. Certainly Ritu's films didn't have that. So I believe that whatever reached out to people outside Bengal was his work. It was his work that spoke for him. And when I moved from Bombay to London, Ritu and I were in university together. So it's an old friendship. And then he was editor of Anandalok. But when I moved to London, it's then when I began to see how much of interest there was in this young filmmaker. Who is he? What's his background? Because they'd just seen Unish April, or they'd just seen Ashok and Dahon, those very powerful films right at the beginning. And in 2001 and 2, I took him for a tour to the UK where he showed his films and spoke at the Institute of Contemporary Culture. And his films had traveled extensively, North America, Europe more so, because I think his sensibility was more European rather than American. And the whole, the history bit of it, and Antar Mahal and Chokher Bali, and the way those films were received in Cannes and in Locarno and in various other major festivals, in Berlin, in London, where his films went every year. So there is that international interest in Rituparno Ghosh, which is huge. And I think this book has an equal market there, because the international edition of the book has already been out, and some of the essays have been out in a journal. And last year the editor's telling us that today you don't value with sales anymore. It's more about downloading, and you check how many people have downloaded. And academically, our papers on Rituparno have been the highest in number to be downloaded last year. So that certainly tells us what's happening.
And also his national awards, I think,
and even film societies used to feature his films quite regularly.
Any other questions?
Since all of you knew him so well, can you tell us a little bit about the films he didn't get to make? We knew of a few like Kabuliwala, Devi Chaudhurani, Mahabharat, Thakurbari, but can you tell us something about films we'll never have, in a sense?
Well, Thakurbari, of course, and I remember a script by Ritu where he was imagining, for instance, as Sangeeta was talking about that Rekha Avatar he had taken in Arekti Premer Golpo, he was thinking of making films where he would have actors playing, queer characters who wouldn't act queer. Right. For instance, we have been tutoring him for a while about the fact that queerness cannot be kind of equated with effeminacy, quote unquote, all the time, because queerness is more than that. And he was planning a film where two friends will be playing queer characters, but they will be quote unquote straight acting. I know that's a very oxymoronic term, but he actually thought the film that way. And again, very interestingly, it had a very powerful mother figure, just like Memories in March, who would again, and of course a divorced woman. This is one film he was imagining. Other one which was really fascinating was Devil Wears Prada, that he wanted to remake, and Ritu wanted to play Meryl Streep. And it was a time when Rituda was actually watching Meryl Streep films quite chronologically. I must tell you one thing, that as Sharmila was telling us, that he was an extremely well-read academic filmmaker. He was a very meticulous viewer, and he had this way of watching films. He would tell me that I would watch the first Meryl Streep film first, because I want to see her, how she evolved as an actor. This is important for me. So used to work, see films of filmmakers as well as actors chronologically. The script of Devil Wears Prada, I believe, has been published, and in Rope Bar, and Sujit Sarkar was supposed to direct it. He wanted to act. Yes, red carpet.
Yeah, and of the other films, I think, as he mentioned, Thakurbari was sort of almost going into production. He was so keen to make that film. His fascination with Tagore was not just about Rabindranath Tagore, but about that whole family in Jorashako and the inside stories, which he found so fascinating. He had a very compelling script ready with that.
And he always had his own interpretation.
His own little take on
and
it.
sometimes we would say, what does Tagore know about the middle class? And he would say, it is tui kore, and cha to erokom bhabei kheto, orom bhabe noy, because he had his own interpretation also. And then he had that another script about two sisters. Yes. Then one goes into religion and becomes like Anandamima or something, and the other one is married with kids, and their, how their life differs and overlaps, and their own compulsions, and how the sisters come together. And so that was a very, very interesting script.
And I can certainly tell you about one incomplete project. A few years ago, I'd written a play. It was more a musical called The Dying Song, which was produced in London, and then it toured all of UK and was loved by people. And it was about a Thumri singer who sometimes thought he was a man and sometimes a woman. And this Thumri singer had a patron of a Nawab, and the Thumri singer then adopts a child. So the story is about this daughter growing up who doesn't know this. One day he's a man, one day he's an Asari and she's a woman, but she's this beautiful singer. So the whole story really revolved around Thumri singing and the art of Thumri. And Thumri itself is a form which really sits between the masculine khayal and the feminine aspects, of the bhajan or the sub-aspects of the classical form.
And his art transcends his sexuality, basically.
Yes. So I'd done that with a very beautiful Thumri singer called Bireshwar Gautam, who lived in Bombay. He was a singer and a Thumri and a Kathak dancer. And we toured with him. We were ready to go into another tour with him when Bireshwar left us. And then Ritu said, Ami eta korbo, chal kar. And we were getting into making this into a Bengali film. And he had finished his tryst with Orisi dance and Chitrangada, and now he wanted to do Thumri. So he, how will I do the Abhinaya as I sit? How will I do the Bhava? And he was ready to go into that territory. But that's when we lost him. So The Dying Song remains an incomplete project. And I'm not sure I can make that film again because I don't have my Bireshwar and I don't have my Ritu. Any other questions?
Yeah, there we have many questions actually.
Excuse me. This is in continuation to the question the gentleman asked. Is some of the work that he, because of his untimely passing away, he must have left some work which was not complete or had just started. One such film that comes to my mind is Sunglass. Are there any efforts being made by the Bengali film industry as such to probably revive, finish any of his incomplete work as a tribute or whatever that may be?
Well, there were two things which happened. He died immediately after making Shotanishi. I mean, he just finished production and a few days later we lost him. So that film was put together by his crew. And Orko Kamal Mitra, who's his, part of that really core creative team, his editor over many, many, many films, he sat with the team and made the film. But to be fair to Orgo, he's a fantastic editor, but we still needed the director's vision there. But the film was made and it was released, and Venkatesh Films today, who are the biggest in our industry today, became big because of Ritu and their association with his films. They distributed the film as well. And then there was What was the other film?
Sunglass.
Sunglass.
That was also shown at the film festival.
But not distributed.
Not distributed
No
because
one
it was
interested.
still unedited. And I remember Ritu telling me once that I've lost interest in the film because it would look dated now. It was made in 2005 until 2015 it wasn't released. So I don't think Plan Man...
He wouldn't have been happy either.
He wouldn't have been happy. We saw the film and it was very really not completely made.
But really a major work that he did, I don't think Shottanishi was his last and major work. His major work was Jibon Sriti, which was the documentary on Rabindranath. And it's sad that again that film was commissioned by NFDC or whatever, the Ministry of Culture, and it was shown on Baishe Srabon on television. And today there are so many people who are looking for the film, and the film's not out there. It's not been out on DVD form. It's not been reshown. It's not been telecast. So somebody was talking about the need for archiving in our session before this. And I think India, we certainly really need to develop that sensibility. We don't have that. And Just Another Love Story, again a film which everybody wants to see on DVD, and the producer doesn't want to take it out at the moment. I don't know what he's wanting to do with it.
I wanted to ask, and this question, as you all of you were speaking, I was wondering that in the world of the director, it's mostly a masculine world. Even today, whether it's Hollywood or Bollywood, there are so many female directors as well. So Rituparno as a director, I mean, he occupies for me a liminal space, not masculine, not feminine. So would any of you like to comment on Ritu as director? And I'm not meaning as a director of films more, I'm talking about his interaction with others as part of the crew, the sensitivities he brought in, the way he handled his camera. How did this liminal position, not masculine, not feminine, affect him as a director and his craftsmanship in a way?
I believe that's what we've been talking about, and I guess one thing I can tell you that you mentioned male directors, female directors. There's one point when Rituda was extremely wary of the fact that there is an LGBT film festival happening. So he said that why do we need a separate identity category for films? Because films do not have gender, films do not have sexuality. But then over a period of time, as we talked about these things quite politically, he realized that perhaps an identity category formation was necessary if you really wanted to bring the periphery into the mainstream, a kind of an integration. And as far as sensitivity is concerned, while he was at work, well, I think both Darshan Di and Sangeeta Di can talk about it because they must have seen him at work. And of course, I don't know, Darshan Di, would you like to?
He's seen him more at work.
Yeah. So if you can just chip in.
Yeah, well, Ritu was comfortable with people with whom he'd worked and who knew his mind. He found it difficult to work with a whole group of new people, which is why when he did Noka Dubi, and then the producer from Bombay took away the editorial it wasn't his cut, it was the producer's cut, which was then floated in the market. He stopped talking to Subhash Ghai. He was so angry and he was so fed up. And he did try going to Bombay because there were several people who'd called him to go and live there, because you have to go and live there and make your presence felt and show your face before you start getting the money for your films. He did that. He tried twice and he came back and he said, I cannot live in that city. I will live here, where there were certain values that he thought were important for his creativity. And I think we, as the core team working with him, recognized this very talented, yet a very fragile sort of a persona. And just this the way you would nurture and protect an artist and try and share that vision and bring it to fruition. That's the sort of, I think, 4 or 5 people who really worked very closely with him to make that vision come on screen. And I'll really end with 2 things. One, where I feel that his whole exploration of his identity was also an exploration of the artist within him. And he was increasingly becoming a very lonely man. He was getting older, he was lonely, and this artistic dilemma about wanting to do things for himself and the responsibility of the outside world, which he had to hold, was becoming a conflicting struggle for him. And in his last films, certainly with Arikti Premer Golpo, I felt there were shades of what I recognize as Guru Dutt and his idea of the artist. I felt felt there was certainly a lot of that working in Arikti Premier Golpa. And when I wrote about that, Ritu was very, very pleased. Not just pleased, he wanted to know more. He wanted to know more why I was saying that. Today, when I look at Sanjay Leela Bansali, for instance, I'm not talking about the opulence and that huge mounting of stage, but that vision, that aesthetics, that sense of history, that sense of putting things together, a right cast. I find a lot of those things are close to what Ritu was doing in a smaller manner in regional films. Sanjay was somebody he was also very close to. They worked together. They spoke a lot during Devdas. And it was Sanjay Leela who introduced him to Aishwarya for Chokir Bali. I think we'll really have to wrap this session now. We'll take that last question.
Hello. I want to know the process of his writing. And second, is there any way to get all his script in English?
I think there has not been any translation so far, and his writings have been collected in first person by these publishers, but that too has not been published as yet. And of course, the translation process would begin. I believe it is too early to do that. We have not, I think it's not out in the market as yet.
I'd like to request Sharmila Di, Darshan, Sangeeta. Sharmila Di will be unveiling the book, so please clap. Okay, thank you, Darshan, thank you, Kaustav, thank you, Sangeeta, and thank you, Sharmila Di, who is just the most amazing delegate speaker to have, because not only does she know everything about cinema, she's also pointed out that there's a sick dog in the Victoria Memorial that I must attend to, and this kind of peripheral vision is something we all must treasure. So thank you ever so much, Sharmila Di.